Listen to me with complete attention. What I'm about to reveal is so dangerous and so liberating that most people spend their entire lives in denial about it. Rudolf Steiner, the clairvoyant who dared to penetrate the mysteries of human consciousness through Anthroposophy, made something crystal clear in his teachings. The world you see is not the world that exists. The world you see is a projection of who you are. Literally, not metaphor, not philosophy, structure, law. Imagine this. You wake up today and look at the world. You see chaos, you see injustice, you see evil people, corrupt systems, a universe indifferent to your pain. But your colleague, the one who transformed his life completely, wakes up and looks at that same world and sees beauty, sees opportunity, sees human beings doing the best they can with what they have, sees a fundamentally wise universe. How is it possible that two human beings looking at identical reality see something so fundamentally different? The answer Steiner gave is devastating in its simplicity, because they're not seeing the same reality. Each one is seeing their own reality. Each one is seeing the mirror of their inner state projected onto the screen of the world. The external reality that materialist science claims is objective and unchanging is actually a stage where your consciousness dramatizes its own limitations. Your problems are not in the world. They're in you. Your suffering is not caused by circumstances. It's caused by how you look at circumstances. Neuroscientists at the University of Wisconsin now confirm experimentally what Steiner saw through clairvoyance. Your brain is not a passive receiver of reality. It's an active generator of it. 90% of what you see is actually generated by your brain, not received from the external world. You're literally hallucinating reality, and the world out there only offers occasional suggestions to correct your hallucination. But the correction is minimal. Most of what you experience as reality is a construction of your consciousness. Transpersonal psychology has long spoken about the concept of projection. You see in others what you refuse to see in yourself. You attract relationships that mirror your traumas. You create the circumstances you fear simply by the way you expect them. But Steiner went further. He taught that it's not just the small things you project. It's everything. Absolutely everything you experience is a reflection of who you are at the deepest level. Reality is your mirror. The universe is your psychologist. Everything you see is feedback about your inner state. This means something radical. You cannot change the world without first changing yourself. You cannot create social justice without first creating inner justice. You cannot attract loving relationships without first developing compassion for yourself. You cannot prosper financially without first transforming your relationship with value and deservingness. Inner transformation isn't an optional spiritual nice to have. It's the only door through which real change passes. But there's a danger here that must be revealed. And when you first understand this, there's a tendency to fall into paralyzing guilt. If everything is a reflection of your inner state, does that mean you're responsible for everything that happens to you? If you were abused, does that mean on some level you deserved it? If you're poor, is it because you're greedy? If you're lonely, is it because you're unlikable? This is a dangerous and incorrect interpretation of the truth Steiner revealed. But it flourishes because the human mind can't resist the impulse to punish itself. The deeper truth is this: inner transformation begins not with guilt, but with observation. You learn to observe your inner state without judgment. You learn to notice. When I see injustice in the world, what feeling is in my chest? When I see beauty, what's the quality of my attention? When I experience rejection, what story is my ego telling about me? This observation, without guilt, without justification, just pure observation, this is the first step on the path Steiner laid out. The ancient Christian mystics understood this as guarding the mind. The Buddhists called it mindfulness. Muap. The Taoists knew it as Wu Wei, observation without interference. But Steiner restored the true magnitude of this. Observation is a force. When you observe something genuinely without trying to change it, the thing observed begins to transform by its own account. It's as if the light of pure consciousness is capable of metabolizing what was in the darkness of unconsciousness. Consider a practical example. You have a pattern. Every time someone begins to get emotionally close, you sabotage. You create conflict, you abandon. For years you blamed other people. They were immature. They didn't understand you. They had their own issues. But when you finally manage to observe this pattern in yourself without guilt, just, I see. Every time there's intimacy, I withdraw. Something mysterious happens. Without you needing to do anything consciously, the pattern begins to loosen. The observation is curative. The light of consciousness metabolizes the shadow that was feeding the pattern. This is what Steiner meant when he spoke of inner transformation. It's not about getting a better therapist or reading more self-help books or going to more spiritual retreats. It's about fundamentally changing the way you see. It's about educating your gaze. It's about developing a quality of attention that's capable of penetrating the illusions of ego and seeing the truth of who you are and the world you inhabit. When you can do this, something remarkable occurs. Without you having done anything different externally, the world begins to respond differently. People begin treating you with more respect because you've begun to respect yourself. Opportunities begin appearing because you've developed the eyes to see them. Problems that seemed unsolvable suddenly reveal their solutions because you're seeing with a completely different quality of consciousness. The world didn't change. You did. And when you change, the reflection in the mirror changes with you. This is the secret that keeps power concentrated. If people understood that their reality is created by their inner state, that their inner transformation is the only door to real change, then the leaders, the gurus, the masters who profit from keeping them broken would lose their power. That's why this knowledge is so desperately suppressed. That's why it's so dangerous. Now we must dive deeper into something most spiritual practices never adequately touch: the ego. Not ego in the colloquial sense of someone being arrogant or full of themselves. Ego in the sense Steiner defined it, that function of consciousness that creates the illusion of separation, that constructs the narrative of me and other, that constantly struggles for survival and affirmation. The ego is not your enemy. This is the first and most crucial understanding. The ego is a tool your consciousness created to function on this material plane, at this level of existence. A newborn has no ego. It's pure consciousness, pure receptivity. And it's absolutely useless. It can't survive. It can't distinguish between itself and the world. The ego develops because it's necessary, because without it, you would die. But here's the problem, and this is critical. The ego is an excellent servant and a terrible master. When the ego is serving higher consciousness, when it's fulfilling its role of facilitating material existence without pretending it's the totality of what you are, everything works. But when the ego believes it is the real thing, that it is all you are, then it starts creating problems. It starts struggling for survival in increasingly desperate ways. It starts inventing stories to justify itself. It starts distorting reality to maintain the illusion that it's in control. Neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett discovered something revolutionary. Your brain is constantly generating predictions about what will happen next. If those predictions don't match what actually happens, your brain enters a state of perturbation. This is why change is so difficult. This is why people resist new information that contradicts their beliefs so fiercely. It's because the ego would experience that as death, and in a sense, it would be right. Its death would be literally necessary for truth to be seen. Steiner taught that the ego has several defense mechanisms, and recognizing these is absolutely essential for any real transformation. The first is rationalization. The ego is a maestro at storytelling. When you do something that contradicts your values, the ego immediately creates a narrative to justify it. You verbally attack someone. Immediately, the ego supplies the reason they deserved it. And I was just being honest. They wouldn't listen otherwise. The story comes so fast, so convincingly, that you don't even notice it's happening. The second mechanism is projection. The ego can't tolerate seeing certain aspects of itself, so it projects those aspects onto other people. You hate selfish people? Probably there's a desperate selfish part of you that you've never allowed yourself to see. You despise ambitious people? Probably there's a burning ambition within you that you've judged as bad. Everything you see in other people that provokes strong emotional reaction is almost always projection. It's a part of you that you refuse to see. The third is victimization. The ego loves being a victim because victimization offers the illusion of moral justification while absolving it of responsibility. If you're the victim, then other people are guilty and you don't have to change. This is incredibly attractive to the ego because it offers a sense of moral integrity without the work of real transformation. For decades, people can maintain themselves in this narrative of victimization, never realizing it's the safest prison they've created. The fourth is sabotage. When you get too close to real change, to a truth that would threaten the ego's structure, the ego suddenly sabotages you. You're almost leaving a toxic relationship. Suddenly, you have a panic attack and return to their arms. You're about to get that important job. Suddenly, you get sick or say something inappropriate. The ego doesn't do this consciously. It's an automatic defense mechanism, but it's devastating in its effectiveness. Now, here's where most spiritual practices fail. They try to destroy the ego. They say the ego is bad, that you need to transcend it, that you need to reach a state of no ego. This is spiritual ignorance. It's like trying to cut the root of a tree while it's still alive. What happens is, you don't eliminate the ego. You just force it deeper into the unconscious, where it continues to operate, now disguised as spirituality. Steiner was very clear. You don't destroy the ego. You educate it. You transform it. You consume it into a larger function. It's like elevating a servant from slave to steward. It still exists. It still fulfills its functions. but now it does so in service to a larger purpose instead of being the purpose itself. How do you begin? By observing, starting to notice moments when the ego is operating. When you hear yourself offering a justification for something you did, when you feel that explosive emotional reaction to something someone said, when you feel the need to prove you're right, these are all moments when the ego is in action. And the work is simply to notice, not to condemn, not to try to change it. Just to notice, there's the ego again, telling stories. As you increase your capacity to observe the ego without being controlled by it, something mysterious happens. The ego begins to relax. It begins to understand you're not trying to destroy it, that you recognize its importance. And when the ego relaxes, it becomes flexible. It becomes available for training. And here's where true transformation can begin. There's a teaching in the ancient mysteries that Steiner restored with full force. You have two pairs of eyes. The physical eyes that see the world of matter, and the eyes of the soul that see the world of spirit. Most people never develop the eyes of the soul. They live their entire existence looking at reality through physical eyes, which can only see surfaces, appearances, illusions. When Steiner talks about inner transformation, a large part of what he's talking about is training these eyes of the soul, learning to see the spiritual reality that underlies material reality, developing a quality of perception that can penetrate beyond appearances and see the forces that create them. Modern neuroscience is discovering something extraordinary. Your eye sees nothing by itself. It's your brain that sees. Your eye is just an instrument through which your brain collects information, and your brain filters that information through its mental models. If your mental model says people are basically evil, you'll see malevolent intentions in every action. If your mental model says the world is fundamentally abundant, you'll see opportunity in every challenge. The eye is seeing the same thing, but your brain, through its filters, is seeing something completely different. This is what Steiner meant by eyes of the soul. He wasn't talking about literal eyes. He was talking about a much deeper level of mental processing that can access data that physical eyes and the material brain cannot reach. He was talking about a way of thinking that can penetrate the symbolic and spiritual nature of things. Consider a simple rose. A botanist sees it and sees chemical composition, petal structure, reproductive mechanism. A poet sees it and sees beauty, transience, the mystery of life. A visionary, someone who has developed eyes of the soul, sees it and perceives the entire story of its creation. The forces of sun that nourished the plant, the forces of earth that anchored the roots, the forces of moon that regulated growth. He perceives the rose as a meeting point of cosmic forces. The rose didn't change, but the level of perception capable of seeing it changed. This is inner transformation. It's not about being more positive. It's not about thinking good thoughts. It's about developing a completely new perceptual capacity. It's about educating your organs of perception so they can access realities that were previously invisible. Steiner outlined specific exercises for this. He called them meditation exercises. But these weren't meditations in the conventional sense of emptying the mind. These were meditations where you concentrated your attention in a very specific way, where you took an image, a concept, or an idea and followed it with your consciousness to increasingly deeper places. For example, a basic exercise was to take a being from nature, like a plant, and spend an entire week carefully observing it, observing how it grows, observing how it responds to light, to water, to soil, observing the intelligence operating through it. And during observation, asking questions. What is directing this growth? What's the intention behind this form? What wisdom is creating these petals? You're not trying to guess the answers. You're really asking. You're using focused observation as an instrument to open channels of perception that are normally closed. And when you do this genuinely, without expectations, without trying to force answers, something extraordinary begins to happen. The plant begins to reveal its secrets. Not with words, but with a quality of understanding so clear and so certain that you can't doubt it. This is training the eyes of the soul. This is how you learn to see through the veil. But there's a danger. As you increase your capacity for perception, you begin to see things most people can't see. You begin to perceive the intention behind people's actions. You begin to feel the forces operating through events. You begin to understand that practically everything in the conventional world is based on illusions. And this can be very disturbing. There's a reason most people keep their soul's eyes closed. It's because spiritual reality is much more complex, much more responsible, much more demanding than material reality. In the material world, you can blame fate, luck, other people. In the spiritual world, you see very clearly that you are a creator, that your choices have consequences, that you're participating in creating your universe. But when you can bear this, when you can stay with this expanded perception without panicking or denying, something extraordinary happens. You begin to live with a freedom and responsibility that's very different from what you experienced before. You're no longer a victim of circumstances. You're an agent of your own evolution. The world doesn't change. You do. And when you change, reality reorganizes itself around your new consciousness. This is what Steiner called the education of the gaze. Now we must touch something most spiritual approaches avoid completely because it's profoundly uncomfortable. The will. Not willpower in the sense of force of will, that internal screaming you do to force yourself to do things against your desires. That's just tension. That's the ego trying to subjugate the rest of itself. True will, according to Steiner, is something completely different. It's the capacity to orient your attention and your energy toward a purpose you genuinely chose, not because you should, but because you saw the truth and beauty in that purpose and now can't do anything but follow it. Consider this. When you do something you really love doing, you don't need willpower. A teenager playing video games for 12 hours straight didn't need motivation. A mother staying up nights caring for a sick child doesn't need willpower. The action flows naturally because there's a deep connection between your being and the action. This is real will. But most people live their lives doing things they don't love, going to work at a job they hate, staying in relationships that hurt them, following careers their parents chose instead of their soul. And to do all this, they need that artificial willpower, that constant tension, because there's a fundamental contradiction between what your being wants and what your ego thinks you should do. Neuroscientists have documented that constant use of willpower depletes a specific resource in your brain called glucose. This is why people who constantly force themselves become mentally exhausted. This is why they finally succumb to their habits, because the resource of force runs out. But when there's an alignment between your true being and your action, there's no glucose use. There's just flow. There's just energy regenerating itself. Steiner taught that inner transformation includes the education of will, but he was very clear. This isn't about achieving more discipline. It's about discovering what you really want, at a deep level, and then organizing your entire life around that. This begins with an honest question. If you weren't afraid, if you didn't need to prove anything, if you didn't depend on anyone's approval, what would you do with your life? And not the quick answer your mind offers, which is usually what you think you should want. The honest answer. The answer that makes your chest tight because you know it's true. For most people, this is a devastating question, because the answer usually reveals they have no idea what they really want. They've spent so much time doing what others wanted, following rules, being responsible, that they've lost connection with their own desire. And this is a kind of death. It's the death of the true self. But this is also where transformation begins. Because once you ask this question genuinely, once you admit the truth about what your being really wants, you can't pretend anymore. You can't live the same life. Life becomes unbearable because you know what's possible now. You know what you really desire, and the gap between that and where you are becomes an abyss that demands to be crossed. Steiner called this the necessary death. It's when you die to the life your parents wanted you to live, to the life society expected you to live, to the life you think you should live, and you're reborn into the life your true being really wants. This is terrifying, because it means letting go of certainties. It means being willing to disappoint people you love. It means accepting that you're responsible for your own joy and can't put it on the shoulders of others. It means saying no to parents, teachers, friends who have made an investment in you being a specific kind of person. It means standing alone for a time. But when you can do this, when you can navigate that death and rebirth, something extraordinary happens. Your will becomes no longer an instrument of tension and conflict, but an instrument of creation. Your action in the world flows from deep alignment. You're no longer living multiple contradictory lives. You're no longer divided against yourself. And when you're no longer divided against yourself, all your energy becomes available for real creation. Dreams are one of the greatest instruments of transformation Steiner revealed, and also one of the most underestimated. Most people treat their dreams as random discards of the mind, as garbage processing. But Steiner saw dreams as a door opening every night to the true theater of who you are, away from the stage of your daytime personality. Every night, when you sleep, your consciousness separates from your physical body and enters what Steiner called the astral body. This isn't a literal body, but a body of emotions, memories, karmic patterns. And in this astral body, you're living very specific dramatizations that reveal the truth about your inner being. A dream where you're being chased isn't random. It's a theater dramatizing that you're running from yourself. A dream where you're in a house with many rooms you didn't know existed isn't accidental. It's a dramatization showing you that there are parts of yourself you've never explored. A dream where you encounter someone who rejects you is precisely a mirror of the relationship you have with yourself. You, at some deep level, are rejecting a part of yourself that the dream is trying to present to you. Sleep researchers have documented that during REM sleep, when dreams occur, brain areas linked to emotion are extremely active, while areas linked to logical judgment are practically shut down. This means that during dreams, you're accessing emotional truths that your logical mind would suppress during the day. The dream is you speaking to yourself in a way your waking mind can't refuse. Steiner taught very specific exercises for working with dreams in a transformative way. It wasn't just dream interpretation like Freud or Jung did. It was a development practice where you learn to be conscious within the dream, where you learn to converse with the symbols of the dream, where you learn to integrate the messages the dream is offering. The first step is simple. Begin remembering your dreams. You do this by placing a notebook by your bed and immediately upon waking, before doing anything else, writing everything you can remember about the dream. At first, you might remember only fragments, but with practice, week by week, your dreams become more vivid, more coherent, more accessible. The second step is observing, not trying to interpret immediately, not trying to force meaning. Just observing. What's the setting? Who's present? What's the overall emotional quality? What's happening? You'll notice that week after week, certain themes begin to repeat, certain symbols keep appearing, certain scenarios recreate themselves with variations. The third step is dialogue. You take a symbol from your dream, something that provoked strong emotion or appeared repeatedly, and you bring it back during the day in a waking state. You meditate on it. And you ask, what are you really? Why do you keep appearing? What are you trying to tell me? And you don't provide the intellectual answer. You sit with the question genuinely open. You allow the answer to arrive as a feeling, as an image, as sudden understanding. As you do this, week after week, month after month, something extraordinary begins to happen. Your dreams begin to coordinate with your inner changes. If you're working on self-compassion, your dreams begin to show scenarios where you're treated gently. If you're working on courage, your dreams begin to present situations where you act courageously. It's as if the universe within you is conspiring for your own development. But there's a much more advanced aspect Steiner revealed. You can train yourself to be conscious within the dream, to not just remember the dream, but to be awake within it, to have agency within the dream, to converse with the symbols, to ask them to reveal their truth, to negotiate with the parts of yourself that are dramatizing in that dream. This leads to very profound transformations, because once you can be conscious within the dream, you begin to bring that consciousness back to waking life. You begin to perceive that waking life is also a kind of dream, that the world you experience during the day is just as constructed by your psyche as the world of the dream. And when you truly understand this, you gain a completely new power over your own reality. There's an instrument Steiner identified as absolutely central to inner transformation. And it's so simple that most people ignore it completely. Compassion. But not soft, sentimental compassion that we offer to others to feel good about ourselves. Radical, selfless compassion that begins inside, directed toward ourselves. Most people spend their entire lives in a war with themselves. There's one part that wants to do one thing, another part that thinks they should do something else, one part that feels anger, another that thinks they shouldn't feel angry, one part that desires something considered bad, another that condemns that desire. And all this internal war creates a fragmentation that's absolutely exhausting. Neuroscientist Kristen Neff documented through research that access to what she calls self-compassion is the single most significant factor in mental well-being, not self-esteem, which can be narcissistic, but genuine self-compassion. People who can offer themselves the same compassion they offer a suffering friend have much higher levels of resilience, creativity, social connection, and joy. But most people were taught that self-compassion is self-indulgence. That if you let yourself go, you'll become lazy, irresponsible, a disappointment. So instead, they develop an extremely severe inner judge. An internal voice constantly criticizing, never satisfied, always pointing out what's wrong. And this inner judge, which originally was created to protect you, to keep you safe and appropriate, becomes a prison. Steiner taught a very specific exercise for this. It's simple, but devastating in its effectiveness. Every time you notice you're judging yourself, every time you hear that internal voice saying, you're weak, you're stupid, you'll never make it, you pause, and you offer compassion. You place your hand on your heart, and you say something like, Dear one, I see you're suffering, I see you're afraid. I see you're doing the best you can with what you have, and I love you in all the ways you are. Not as a trick, not as a manipulation technique, genuinely. At first, this is extremely uncomfortable, because there's a deep part within you that was taught that deserving love is contingent, that deserving compassion is contingent, that there are conditions that need to be met before you can rest gently in yourself. And offering compassion to yourself unconditionally violates all that. It feels wrong. But when you can do this genuinely, when you can offer yourself the same compassion you'd offer a hurt child, something mysterious begins to happen. The inner judge begins to relax, because it understands you're not trying to ignore it, you're not trying to deny it, you're seeing it and offering compassion anyway. And when the inner judge relaxes, many things it was repressing begin to be released. Memories you had suppressed begin to surface, not in a traumatizing way, but in a way that can be processed. Desires you had denied begin to make themselves heard, not in a way that leads you to act irresponsibly, but in a way that directs you toward your true vocation. The parts of yourself you had rejected begin to find integration. It's as if compassion is the force that dissolves rigidity. Compassion is what makes real transformation possible. Because transformation requires death, and death is terrifying. But when you offer compassion, death becomes less terrifying. Death becomes a transition, a metamorphosis, not a failure. As you cultivate that internal compassion, as you become your own ally instead of your own enemy, something begins to radiate outward. You begin to offer less judgment to other people, because you're no longer so caught in judgment with yourself. You begin to see other people with more compassion, because you understood, in a very deep way, that every person is doing the best they can with what they have. And when you can see this way, the entire world transforms. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And when you change, the reflection in the mirror changes with you. This is the secret Steiner taught about the inner judge. It's not something to destroy. It's something to educate, to soften, to transform into a protector rather than a persecutor. Now we must touch something most approaches to transformation can't even perceive exists: your relationship with time. Steiner revealed something extraordinary about this. He taught that humanity hasn't always experienced time as we experience it now, that the perception of time is something that evolved just as all things evolve, and that true inner transformation includes a fundamental transformation in how you experience time. Most people live trapped in a line of time. The past is behind, the future is ahead, and you're stuck at a point called now that's constantly slipping backward. This creates a sensation of escape, of there always being something important you're missing, of there never being enough time, of you always running to catch something that's always fleeing. Quantum physicists discovered something very strange. Time doesn't work the way it seems to work. There's evidence that the past and future exist simultaneously, that the notion of a moving present is more a creation of our consciousness than a fundamental feature of reality. And there are researchers like Philip Zimbardo who documented that people with different relationships with time have fundamentally different qualities of life. Steiner taught that as you develop spiritually, as you transform your interior, your relationship with time also transforms. You begin to understand that the past isn't really behind you, that the past is alive within you, in every cell, in every pattern, in every memory, that the past can be transformed now. How is this possible? Consider this. A memory is a living thing. Every time you remember something, you're recreating that experience in your body. You're re-experiencing the emotion, you're reactivating the neural patterns. But here's the secret Steiner revealed. You can change how you remember. You can offer compassion to the person you were in the past. You can offer forgiveness. You can reimagine the experience with understanding and love. And when you do this genuinely, the memory changes. The energetic pattern changes. And this has an effect, not just on your present, but on how the universe itself is perceived. Similarly with the future. Most people imagine a future based on fear, based on past projected forward. If you were rejected in the past, you imagine rejection in the future. If you were poor, you imagine poverty. If you were lonely, you imagine loneliness. And this future imagination, these expectations, they become self-fulfilling prophecy. Because your consciousness, awaiting that future, positions itself in such a way that it materializes. But you can imagine differently. You can deliberately imagine a future that's aligned with your true being, not in a fantasized or unreal way, but in a way that's profoundly true to who you really are. And this imagination, this active and intentional imagining, also becomes realized prophecy. But the truly transformative aspect is learning to be present, genuinely present. Not just mentally absent, wandering, but truly here, now, wholly. When you can do this, something extraordinary happens. The now stops being this tiny point escaping between past and future. The now expands. The now becomes vast. The now becomes almost infinite. And in this vast now, you discover that the past and future are already here. Because everything you experience is actually a creation of now. You're recreating your past right now. You're imagining your future right now. And when you can be completely present in this now, when you can bring all your attention, all your intention to this moment, you acquire tremendous power. Because everything in life happens now. All change happens now. All transformation occurs now. When you can master the now, when you can be whole and present in the now, you can change everything. Not through desperate effort, but through conscious participation in the creative process of reality itself. This is what Steiner meant by entering the eternity of now. It's not escaping time. It's understanding that you are the creator of time, not its victim. Now we arrive at one of Steiner's most dangerous and most powerful teachings: what to do with the emotions you feel. Most spiritual approaches offer one of two options: repress the emotions, pretend they're not happening, be too spiritual to feel them, or be controlled by them, be a helpless victim of your feelings, a leaf blown by the wind. But Steiner revealed a third option, an option that's much more sophisticated and much more powerful: transform the emotions, metabolize them, convert them into something completely different. This is what he called inner alchemy. Consider anger. Anger is an emotion many spiritual people try to deny. I shouldn't be angry. Evolved people don't feel anger. But this is foolishness. Anger is powerful energy. The question isn't whether you should feel anger. It's, well, what do you do with the anger you feel? One person can channel their anger into aggression, into violence, into destruction. This is when anger is raw, is unconscious. But someone who understands emotional alchemy can take the same anger and transform it into justice, into a passionate commitment to what's right, into the capacity to say no, to set boundaries, to not tolerate injustice. Similarly with fear. Most people try to eliminate fear, try to be brave, but fear is an intelligence. It's your body offering you information. This is what Dr. Bessel van der Kolk documented. The body knows before the mind. The body feels danger before it can be articulated. Therefore, fear isn't something to be eliminated. It's something to be translated. You can transform fear into vigilance, into wisdom, into capacity to navigate dangerous situations with intelligence instead of denial, or consider sadness. In conventional society, there's enormous pressure not to be sad, to always be positive, always optimistic. But sadness is a door. Sadness is where you touch depth. When you can be entirely with your sadness, when you can feel it completely without fleeing, something happens. Sadness begins to reveal itself as something much deeper. It reveals itself as a kind of sacred sorrow, a touching of the fragile beauty of existence, a compassion for suffering and all that lives. Steiner taught a very specific exercise for this. When you feel a strong emotion, instead of trying to flee it or being controlled by it, you meet it, you sit with it, you feel it with the utmost intensity possible, you don't throw it out, you bring it in, you allow it to flood you completely. And in this moment of total surrender, you ask a question. What are you? Really? What truth are you trying to communicate? And here's where the alchemy happens. As you can be present with the emotion without judgment, without trying to change it, the emotion begins to transform of its own accord. Anger, when fully felt and accepted, begins to reveal the truth behind it. There's injustice that needs to be confronted. There's a need to establish boundaries. Fear, when fully accepted, reveals wisdom. There's something that deserves respect. There's something that deserves caution. And as you become increasingly skillful at this emotional alchemy, something extraordinary happens. You're no longer controlled by your emotions, but you also don't repress them. You can be in conscious relationship with them. You can dialogue with them. You can transform what would be destructive into what's creative. And this has a cascading effect. As you can alchemize your own emotions, you can do this with other people too. You can be present with someone who's angry, afraid, sad, in a way that the emotion is honored, is heard, and is slowly transformed. You become someone people want to be around, because being with you is safe, because you won't repress your emotions, won't be controlled by them, but will be present in relationship with them in a way that's transformative. This is the secret of emotional maturity that Steiner taught. Emotions are not enemies. They're allies in disguise, offering you information, offering you power, offering you pathways to deeper truth. Steiner revealed something that materialist science is only beginning to understand, that you're not isolated, that there's no real separation between you and the rest of the universe, that everything is connected through an invisible web of relationships, and that every action of yours, every thought of yours, every emotion of yours sends ripples through this web. This is what quantum physicists discovered called quantum entanglement. Particles that were once in contact remain connected in a way that's completely mysterious. Change one particle and the other changes instantaneously, even if they're on opposite sides of the universe. This isn't magic, it's science. It's the fundamental structure of reality. But this has profound implications for inner transformation. It means that when you transform, when you change your inner state, you're literally transforming the world. You're changing the energetic vibration of reality. You're affecting things and people you may never meet or know exist. Steiner taught that there are souls you've spent centuries helping, souls that are working in areas you'll never visit. And when you transform internally, when you develop qualities like compassion, courage, wisdom, these qualities echo through the web. They reach those who need them. They help people you'll never know. This changes completely the meaning of inner transformation. It's not just about you and your personal happiness. It's not just about you getting what you want. It's about participating in the collective development of human consciousness. It's about being an instrument through which the universe is working on itself. There's a responsibility in this that's very great, because it means you can't be negligent with your own development. You can't say, oh, well, my selfishness is just my problem. Your selfishness affects other people. Your greed affects other people. Your fear affects other people, because everything ripples through the web. But there's also extraordinary hope here, because it means even small transformations matter. If you can transform one pattern that was affecting your life, you're transforming a pattern that was affecting all the lives you touch. If you can develop compassion for yourself, you're increasing the frequency of compassion in all of reality. If you can develop courage, you're encouraging courage in others. This is what Steiner understood as mission, not as something grand you need to do in the future, but as something that's happening now through your own inner transformation. Your true mission isn't to go out and change the world. The world doesn't need to be changed. The world is perfect as it is. You're here to awaken, to remember, to understand deeply. You're not separate. You're connected to everything, and your transformation is the world's transformation. We arrive now at the culmination, the place where all true inner transformation leads, complete awakening, not as some mystical peak experience after which everything changes permanently, but as a continuous process of death and rebirth, until you finally understand what Steiner always knew, that you're much greater than you thought. But there's a final aspect that must be revealed, and it's the most dangerous and the most important, the integration of the shadow. Everything we've discussed until now is only half the process, the half that's about transcending, about evolving, about expanding. But there's another half that's about descending, about accepting, about integrating. The shadow, in the sense that Jung defined it and that Steiner confirmed, is everything in you that you refuse to see. Not just our sins and failures, also our powers and our grandeur. Most people spend their lives refusing to see both, refusing to see their capacity to cause harm, and also refusing to see their capacity to create beauty. As you work through the exercises we've discussed, as you begin to develop expanded perception, as you cultivate compassion, something extraordinary begins to happen. The shadow begins to appear, not gently, often in very disturbing ways. You begin to see in yourself things you never wanted to see. Selfishness you denied having, malice you believed you were above, weakness you pretended didn't exist, and this is crucial, because true transformation doesn't happen by transcending the shadow. It happens by integrating the shadow, by bringing what's in darkness into light, by accepting that yes, you're selfish, yes, you're weak, yes, you have capacity to cause harm, and loving yourself anyway. This is different from remaining in the shadow. It's not about acting from your selfish instincts, it's about seeing the reality of who you are completely, without castration or illusion, and loving yourself all the same. When you can do this, when you can integrate your shadow this way, you're no longer divided, you're whole. And a whole person has a power that a divided person can never access. Steiner taught that when you can integrate your shadow this way, you're reborn. Not in a metaphorical sense, but literally. The neurological structures of your brain begin to reorganize, the energetic structures of your body begin to realign, you literally become a different person. And this isn't the end of the process, because as soon as you integrate one layer of shadow, another deeper layer reveals itself. As soon as you can see one truth about yourself, an even deeper truth appears. It's an infinite process, an infinite progression of death and rebirth, of descent and ascent, of revelation and integration. But at some point, when you can do this sufficiently consistently, when you can remain in honest relationship with the reality of who you are, when you can love yourself in all the ways you are, something transforms fundamentally. You perceive that this search for transformation, this search for development, this struggle to become someone better, was based on an illusion. You always were what you were trying to become. All the qualities you sought to develop were always within you, just sleeping, waiting for you to recognize them. All the inner transformation you believed you needed to do was actually just the process of removing the layers of illusion that had obscured what you always were. And when you understand this, and when you truly integrate this, you're reborn, not as someone new, but as what you always were, as the wholeness that was there from the beginning. As the child you were before the wounds, before the decisions, before the judgments, and at the same time, you're something new, because you've passed through a process of complete death and complete rebirth. You're what you always were, seen now with completely opened eyes. And here's the final secret Steiner revealed. This is only the beginning. Because once you can see yourself clearly, once you can integrate your own shadow and be born whole, you perceive that this was never really about you. It was about the universe learning to see itself through you. It was about creation knowing itself completely. It was about God, or the cosmic being, or whatever you want to call the fundamental intelligence of reality, using your consciousness to understand its own nature. And suddenly, you're no longer transforming yourself. You're being transformed, not by something external, but by what you always were, by the God within you, by the truth within you, by the light you always were, but that was obscured by shadows. When you can remain in this place, when you can trust sufficiently to surrender completely, when you can die completely to what you believed yourself to be, that's when true life begins. That's when you discover you weren't here to change the world. The world doesn't need to be changed. The world is perfect as it is. You were here to awaken, to remember, to understand deeply you're not separate. You're home. You've always been home. And this home you found within yourself, this awakening, this return, now you can offer this to the world simply by being awake. Before you change the world, learn to change your gaze. Because when you change your gaze, the entire world changes with you. And when the world changes with you, you perceive that the world never needed to be changed. You only needed to learn to see it as it really is, as the living, breathing, infinitely intelligent manifestation of a single consciousness that is you, that is me, that is all of us, expressing itself in countless forms. And this, finally, is the inner transformation that Steiner invited us to undertake. Not a transformation of yourself into someone different, but a transformation of your perception so you can finally see who you always were. The teacher had no teaching. The student had no need to learn. There was only the endless unveiling of what was always true. And in that unveiling, in that gradual removal of the veils, you become yourself, completely, finally. Home.